All right. Hey, everybody. This is Sue Bell from Market Domination Solutions. I'm here today with Rich Boyd, our security expert who was with us a couple months ago. He's going to go over some of the hottest security issues, give you guys a checklist that you can take away, and you can use it either for your own business or you can use it for your clients' businesses. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time this morning. We got a pretty full room, so without any further ado, I'm going to step aside and let Rich take it away. Rich, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Not a problem. However, this is indeed the question for the audience. What is the biggest cyber threat to your network?
My guess
Dee-dee-dee.
is gremlins.
Gremlins? Okay. Dee, 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 dee. Wait,
You're
I
waiting
don't
for
seem
people
to.
to actually type something into the question box, aren't
I am indeed.
you? Ooh. George has given us, answers are piling in. So George
Good.
says failure of regular backups. Vince
Vince says
says hackers.
hackers. Okay.
When hackers, exactly, Vince.
Ah, okay. Yes. Hmm. Well, okay. Well,
Ooh,
actually,
ooh.
what?
Stacy said people
People
making
making mistakes.
mistakes.
Actually, that's, well, we'll get there. Okay. However, here is the answer that I was actually looking for. Some of these are creative, but all right. The real answer is insider threat, and then not all insider threat involves an employee walking out with company secrets. And it's also a case of not all of it. It's just you're dealing with people and just generally, and there's going to be issues involved with your own employees. The other one is what I'm going to cover today is not an exhaustive list. This is only supposed to be an hour presentation.
But you're going to cover the biggest, heaviest hitting ideas, right?
Right. And Vince, yeah, I love her outfit too. That's why I included her. She looks a lot better. She's a lot more fun to look at than say Snowden. Um, okay, so the answer is insider threat. So the question is, of course, is what are the motivations for malicious action?
Well,
Your employees are human.
can you define what an insider threat means?
An insider, okay, you've got things on the inside of your operation, and you've got in this particular case, your networks, your data, and you've got things outside of your operation, and so you've got an external threat, meaning bad guys trying to get in. You've got insider threat, meaning basically these are the problems dealing with your own people. Um, and and believe it or not, your own people are actually your biggest threat. We'll get into right now, getting into your motivations of why this is, but your employees are humans, and you're going to have they're going to have a number of different things. One of which is a disgruntled employee, basically meaning an employee that you've got that's mad at you. Just a second. Okay, George. Yeah, that's definitely a disgruntled employee. I can't but wonder why. He said, my client hired a web developer, told me to give access, fired the web guy, but didn't tell me. Funny thing, website went down. Yeah, you do things like that, you're going to piss people off, and people are going to hit you back. So, but one of the things that is going to cause a problem is you're going to get personality clashes. Sorry about that. You're dealing with people, and people's personalities will indeed clash. It happens. but it is indeed a motivation for malicious action, and they might end up attacking one another. The other one, okay, so it's inevitable at some point. The next one, unethical actions by an employer. Now, you may not agree with what Snowden did, but he saw his actions being motivated by unethical behavior on the part of his employer. We'll leave. Okay, the next one is screwing over your own employees. So for example, replacing American labor with foreign labor, this being only one instance of that. The use of H-1B visas to replace American workers isn't often mentioned in cybersecurity briefings, but treating your people as if they are disposable is a good way to make them treat your company as if it's disposable. You hit your people don't be surprised when they hit back. I'm surprised that it has, in this particular, in the H-1B visa example, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more often. The other one is money. Okay, money can be a motivation for a whole host of things. The items I'm going to mention are more variations on a theme than anything really different. So, for example, we've got the sale of company and personal data. So, for example, PII, your company. Well, you've got a whole host of different company information. All of these things, if stolen, have a monetary value that someone can use. Okay, so you've got fraud, embezzlement. There's also simple mistakes. We are human, and so, for example, when Stacy said people making mistakes, that is indeed the case. People make mistakes. Sometimes these mistakes can be as simple as hitting a delete button by accident. Sometimes, so it happens, but we simply need to accept the fact that they are going to need to happen, and they are a threat to your cybersecurity. One more is social engineering. Now, social engineering takes place is a type of fraud, and one of the most popular are phishing attacks, which is so these things are going to be used for anything from installing what's called a rootkit, which is a type of application that allows a bad guy to get, it basically installs a back door for bad guys. The other one is
giving them access to what?
To your network, and so they can do from there. They do whatever they want to do, whether they're actually want to be on your network, whether they want to destroy data, whether they want to steal data, whether they possibly want to reroute your bank deposits. Once they have access, they are on your network and they have the proper credentials, it's up to them, and they can get creative. So it's kind of up to them, whatever they want to be doing, and depending on what your network actually is. The other one is to install ransomware. Now, ransomware is, from where I'm sitting, is really kind of cool because what it does is it encrypts your entire hard drive, and then you have to pay the bad guys ransom to get the decryption code. The good part about it is, surprisingly enough, that the bad guys are actually usually giving the decryption code, but there have been some serious amounts of money being stolen by the use of ransomware. Bad guys are getting really fond of them, but they install simply because of a mistake made by a member of your company. They don't, it's not because you've got a disgruntled employee that's mad at you. He makes a mistake, and it happens. So accept that fact. Now, so what do we do with what do we do about it? Well,
That's an interesting quote.
yeah, that's why I bumped into that one once upon a time before, and I really happened to like the quote, and frankly, more companies need to have it stapled on the front of their doors. But so what do we do about disgruntled employees? We've got a number of different things. First off, we've got our personality clashes. We can try to minimize our personality clashes, but they are indeed going to happen. People simply need to learn that they're going to have to work with people they don't like. People are going to have to learn that they may have to work with people they can't stand. But regardless, they're simply attacking one another is simply not to be tolerated. Now, your company policy is kind of up to you as to how you want to deal with this, but it is indeed a threat that you're going to need to be taken care of, and you need to be aware of. The other one is how do you deal with unethical actions by the employer, which is in this case being you. Well, the obvious one is run an ethical operation for legal as well as security reasons. As an example, Merck Pharmaceutical said that they had removed mercury from their vaccinations. An employee leaked the memo stating that this was a lie. So when you commit such unethical behavior, don't be surprised when one of your employees leaks your secrets. The easiest way to get around this is run an ethical operation. If you're not lying to your customers, if you're not lying to government, you don't have any problems worrying about what's going to happen to you when your secrets leak. Okay, there's some legal, ethical reasons, but there's a good way to get around this one. The next one is screwing over your people. Well, that's the reason why this quote is there. But basically, if you treat your people, if you take care of your people will take care of you. And if you treat your people well, you'll build a certain loyalty to your organization, and your employees will then will take care of you. But if you treat your employees like they're disposable, don't be surprised when they treat you the same way. It's a fairly simple concept. It's not what you normally would think of in terms of cybersecurity, but it is a way of addressing some of your cybersecurity problems when you're dealing with insider threats. So next one is money. Okay, what do we do? How do we take care of the problems with your employees being motivated for money? Well, so what do we do? Well, first of all is there's a concept in cybersecurity that says that there's data at rest, data in process, and data in transit. Now, obviously, your data in process you can't do anything about. That is not going to be encrypted. Your data in transit and your data at rest, those can. And so you need to make sure that you have fully encrypted hard drives, meaning that you have encrypted communications and you have fully encrypted hard drives. Any data that is in transit, going over the wire, is encrypted. Going over the wire, going over air, going over fiber. Make sure that is encrypted. If somebody intercepts that, they're not going to get anything that they can actually use. The second one is fully encrypted hard drives. So if somebody steals your, or if somebody walks out with one of your computers, or one of your computers gets stolen or something, they're going to get it, but they're not going to get data that they can actually do anything with. The uh, the other one is that the military actually prohibits any device that is capable of photography from being in the area where your data is being taken care of, in a number of different secure areas. This is probably more than you really want to do, but this gives you an idea of the kind of things that can be done to harden your data, to harden your information.
Okay, so let's just pause for a second and bring this down
Yep.
into the real world, because it sounds good, but you and I have had some conversations, and we talked a little bit about this last time, but it's worth bringing up again. You were talking to me about, I said to you, we're in this small office space. Nobody else comes into this office space. Why should I bother to encrypt my hard drive? And you mentioned the maid, and you're like, what happens when she comes? And I'm like, well, I hate to listen to the vacuum cleaner, so I usually go to lunch or take a coffee break or something. I completely leave the building. And you just look at me and I'm like, oh shit. Because, yeah, absolutely, she's of an economic status where I'm sure she could be persuaded by financial rewards or whatever. And, everything is on my hard drive. My whole list, like a backup copy of my list, is on my hard drive. And, passwords to my bank account, I don't trust them in the web. I don't trust them in a lot of places, but they're in a plain text file on my hard drive. So, all it would take is a thumb drive inserted into my computer and a couple of folders downloaded, and you could be, in and out in about 10 minutes if you knew what you were looking for.
Well, the other one though is you wouldn't even have to, depending on what else she does, if she were to kind of go browsing around and find it, all she had to do is to whip out her phone and start taking pictures of your screen, and boom, there you go.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
harder to transcribe all that, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? All right. Once I've got your login information from your bank, goodbye bank account.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's for convenience sake, I also have a scanned copy of my passport and a scanned copy of my driver's license and yada yada. Because every twice in a while you need that for whatever it is that you're doing that you have to prove your identity. Blah blah blah. So yeah, it's like when I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, that's actually completely not cool. Now, I don't happen to have client lists on my computer because I just, I haven't been in that kind of a situation where I've moved my clients from one email host to another email host. But I can guarantee you, had I done that, I would have kept a backup copy while it was being moved from place one to place two so that I knew that, the transition went smoothly, and I'm sure I would just forget to delete it post hoc. So, that can get ugly really fast.
And you're not necessarily the standard company either. I mean, not to pick on somebody that we've had to deal with before, but just even restaurants have banking information, and they have recipes, and they have PII for all of their employees, and all of this information does have a monetary value. Okay, somebody is going to be interested in buying it someplace. Okay? So therefore, making sure that that what you find they can't use is
so if I encrypted my hard drive and they threw a thumb drive in the USB port, would they still be able to copy the files? And if so, is it copied encrypted or unencrypted?
The copy would probably be encrypted, but could you please put that question on hold for about one more slide, because I'm going to address that.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Now, our next one is to remote maintenance of mobile devices. Now, first off is all devices need to be updated for software patches. Security patches come out aperiodically depending upon which device you're talking about. All of these devices are constantly finding software vulnerabilities. All of them need to be updated. But this also includes all of your mobile devices. And your company probably has has excuse me, probably has laptops. They probably have tablets. They probably have company phones. All of this information, all of these things contain information. All of these things then need to be updated. But the only way that you're going to be able to do that is through remote maintenance. The other part about this is these are mobile devices. They get stolen, they get lost. It's going to happen. It's simply a matter of when, not if. There are ways that these devices can be remotely wiped. That basically means that everything on that device is simply gone. A very thorough deletion. What that means, though, is that that Mr. Bad Guy may end up with a tablet, but he doesn't end up with all of your company data on the tablet that Mr. Bad Guy has stolen or found, or whatever the case. So, these devices need to have remote wiping capability. You also need to have some computer security locks. Sue was mentioning things like the information you've got on your laptops. Laptops can easily be, because they're laptops, they can simply be picked up and and somebody can simply wander off with them quite easily. Therefore, these devices need to be secured. So now it becomes much more difficult. Locks don't prevent all theft, but they make it much more difficult, and so they need to be, that degree of difficulty then needs to be added so that you at least cut it down. The other one is to prevent what's called shoulder surfing. That's basically somebody looking over your shoulder while you're working, and this is a number of things. So you need to make sure that try to prevent people from looking over your shoulder, but this also includes trying to make sure that your security cameras aren't sitting over your shoulder watching whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, so this also includes people being able to look through the window, and even though you're up on a upper floor, there are such things as telescopes, and they can be, you can actually be somebody who can shoulder surf even though that you're in an upper floor. It's not necessarily a case of will they, or every company or every operation is going to be worth the bother, but it is still a capability, still a possibility. But it also means that working in places like Starbucks can be very dangerous because you're out there in the open and there's an awful lot of people around. The other thing is surveillance cameras. With surveillance cameras can be hacked. There have been instances where somebody hacked a surveillance camera, and it did indeed get the login information for the administrators through a hacked the surveillance camera. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a hacked surveillance camera, because once again, if you're in a place like, say, Starbucks, and they have surveillance cameras that are looking over your shoulders, for all you know, an employee of whatever company could be stealing your data simply by looking through the surveillance tapes later. So you need to basically be looking out for what's behind you. But this also includes when you're on an airplane or other forms of mass transit, because there's an awful lot of people that are in really good places to be looking over your shoulders. There are screens, there are films that you can put over your screen that makes it much more difficult to see what you're doing from the side. The other one is when dealing with shoulder surfing is to be careful about what it is, that somebody can't be seeing what it is you're typing when you're entering your PIN for your bank information.
Right.
Remote keyboard readers via electronic emissions. Same with sounds of keys can be sometimes used via built-in mics. Yeah. This is kind of a case of how badly do you want to harden your network, your operation? Because when I was working with the military and I was in a secure area, we were not allowed to have anything wireless. We did not have wireless keyboards. We did not have wireless mice. Silly, because once again, you've got electronic emissions, and anything that's being sent can be intercepted. I didn't want to go into that much because I didn't think people would want to harden it that hard, but it is indeed a valid statement. So depending on your level, shall we say, your level of paranoia, eliminating wireless devices is indeed a possibility.
Or the degree of sensitivity of your business.
Yes, but it's the reason why I don't have why I don't have wireless devices, and I didn't when at the house either because of this.
Fascinating.
Now the next one is, okay, see, Sue, you were getting ahead of us. Okay, Eric Snowden used the thumb drive to walk out with NSA secrets. The reality is there's very little reason why employees need to have employees need to have hard drives with write capability. In fact, when was the last time you actually really needed a hard drive at all? I mean, a disk drive at all? These can simply be removed.
You mean a thumb drive?
No, the disk drives. Your DVD players that have.
Oh, the CD,
right.
DVD ROMs, right?
Yes, right. They have most of the drivers, or most of the drives have the right capability, and
it's becoming harder to actually get those drives at least in a laptop.
Quite true, but whatever it is that you've got, if you do have them, there's no reason for them to stay there. You're doing, you're not using them all that often, and you're opening yourself up to the possibility that an employee can walk out with company data.
Right.
The other one is that with the military, because of Eric Snowden, they've disabled the thumb drive drivers. You plug it in and it's not going to do anything. In fact, it'll give a warning to the security office. And if you may want to talk, depending on your, I've listed it as operational because depending upon the size of your company, you probably don't have the IT people, the IT capability to be able to go quite that far. But it is definitely an option that should be taken a look at. Getting back to another question that Rick put in, said something about it can be this sort of the intercepting of keyboards and mice can be done without wireless devices by NSA level people. Yeah, but that's NSA level people, and NSA level people right now have some really spooky things that came out of, what was it called, Vault 7. Some of the stuff that got leaked, and I think some of that stuff that they've gotten has gotten to the point of being almost black magic, but they've got some really scary stuff. Okay, let's see. But okay, so Sue, does that answer your question that you had earlier about walking out it with your thumb drives?
No, because so you said that if my hard drive is encrypted and I put in a thumb drive and I copy a file, that file is going to be encrypted on my thumb too. So if that person takes that thumb drive away, they're probably not going to be able to read the file. Is that correct?
That would be correct, but if they were to, that's what kind of a case of depends on how they're going to copy it. Because if I copy it directly from file to file, I'm probably going to get exactly the same way that I got it in the first place. If I brought it up on screen and copied it back out, I probably would be able to get it unencrypted. So that's why I said it's kind of a case of depends on how they're going to do it, what they're going to actually get.
All right. So you made yeah.
No, Rick just
I know. I
said
saw
something
Rick's comment.
Rick just said something about need to work in a Faraday cage, also remote screen emissions.
So a minute ago you mentioned black magic, right? In terms of the NSA.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of this conversation, if we have time, I want you to talk about some of that black magic because that's the fun stuff. I like bleeding edge. I want to know where the blood starts. So
well, some of it I
no,
wasn't
that's okay.
keeping
We can. I don't want to derail your thing here, so we can talk
Well,
at the end.
Rick mentioned something about when he goes also remote screen emissions. This is actually a question for Rick. Have you ever worked in a military or a government skiff? You practically are. It's buildings with no windows or very, very heavy curtains, and it's probably got a Faraday cage, and it's got, anyway, they get, there's some real paranoia factors depending on the level of your skiff. Okay. Now, let's see. Next. There are some policies, procedures, and guidelines about what they call about how you should be dealing with your employees, and one of them, which is they call as least privilege, and least privilege basically says that employees should be given access to what it is that they need for their jobs, but not more. Basically, the idea is that that not everybody needs, for example, access to the accounting department. So in that particular case, then other people, only those people should be able to get in there, and basically you limit it, because the more limited access they have, the less that they're going to walk out with, the less damage that they're purposely going to be able to do. There's some other things that go along with this. Once again, because of space and time, I haven't got into too terribly much detail on some of this, but some of the things are also is that you have what they call a policy of job rotation, and that is so that people learn, so that more than one person is trained to do a particular job, and that way, so nobody becomes irreplaceable. And also, so because, for example, people people get sick, they quit, they retire, they die, whatever. You don't want to have the loss of one key person basically derail your company for a period of time. So more than one person needs to be able to do any particular job. The second one that they say is a policy of mandatory vacations. Now this does a couple of things. First off is people need breaks. That's all there is to it.
What?
But the other one is,
Wimps?
breaks.
Sorry.
Breaks. You are acquainted with that vacation?
No.
It's
well, only third person. It's yeah. It's just like wimps. That's all I can say.
Google it. It also is a case. Google it. Maybe you'll find out what they are. The other one in your case, but the other one is you're a single person company, and so you don't really, you don't have anybody else that you're going to be putting
Even
in.
when I was part of a large team, they would all freak out if I was gone for more than 48 hours. Like the world would come to a complete crashing halt. So it's yeah.
Right, and that's something that would be against modern security policies.
Correct.
But the other part, though, is that there have been instances where people have been doing committing fraud or something along these lines, and what happens is that everything goes along just fine as long as they're there and for over however many years, and then when mandatory vacations to come about, all of a sudden somebody calls or something happens and the person ends up getting caught because they weren't they weren't the only person there. So it's a case of it's good because of making sure that people are rested, that it's for health purposes, but it's also somewhat of a case of, yeah, but we're also going to double check and make sure that you're not up to something that you shouldn't be up to. So, and then I have background checks. Now, employees should be subject to background checks and to drug screenings. I mean, yeah, to be drug screening. You want to make sure that your people are that your people do not have a history of either one of these, especially with new hires. There are companies such as one that's called Good Hire that can help with doing background checks.
Nice.
But your people need to be.
The drug testing, that's so that if they're taking good drugs, they have to share, right?
That's up to you. I mean, your company is your. Even in the Netherlands, I think they require. Actually, they do. I know they do. Drug screening.
Interesting.
You go into certain places in Amsterdam and walk around in the summer, and you can get pretty well stoned by just walking on the street. So, but you do need to be double checking. But you need to be checking to make sure that you're hiring that you're hiring good people.
Right.
I've even seen a couple of places where they've required a government clearance, not because that they're doing anything with the government, but they figure that if you've got a government clearance, that you've already been through a very thorough background check, which is kind of interesting. Now,
so it's like a poor company's background check.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Now, next.
Do you have any idea how much someplace like Good Hire charges for a background check?
I have not a clue.
Okay.
They made it look like it was a fairly simple. They said, "Well, it's so easy, and it could almost be downright fun." And I thought, "Ooh, yeah, Rick, you're right. It could get tricky with medical marijuana. The background checks."
That should they should have a prescription for that, so it should all be good, right?
It should, but employers being what they are, they might start saying, "Well, I don't want you in here, even if you do have the
right." Certain
prescription."
positions, right? Certain positions might be exempt, or yeah.
Yeah. What if they do both? You're talking about, Rick. You're talking about what if they do both medical marijuana and not so medical marijuana?
Recreational, I think.
Yes.
They call
Okay.
That.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Exactly. How do I tell? The active chemical is going to come out exactly the same way. Okay. Once again, our other one is mistakes. Okay. Your employees are human, and they are going to make mistakes. You can mitigate against it. You can try to minimize it, but you simply need to accept the fact that they are indeed going to make mistakes. Your risk analysis or whatever training you want to call it, it's going to happen. But so what is it we can do? Well, one is we can do kind of countermeasures. One of which is training. Now, we don't need to go into quite this degree of training, but training is still a measure. Your employees need to be trained as to what to be aware of and what to do when mistakes occur. The other one is what they call what the military calls OPSEC, and that's operational security. And essentially, it's learning your employees need to learn how to keep their mouth shut. You have secrets. You want to make sure that your company keeps your secrets, and so they simply have to learn how to keep their mouth shut. Now, this is something from what is called the Havamal, and this is from the these are the words of Odin, the Nordic god of wisdom, and this is basically this is how the Vikings thought of OPSEC. So it actually does indeed date to the Viking period. The other one is as far as training is, huh?
I have to disagree. It's better to not tell a secret to anyone.
Yeah, okay. The next one is situational awareness. Situational awareness is being aware of your surroundings. Think of the Old West gunfighter. He's always sitting back there in the corner. His back is not to a wall. He's always watching to see what else is going on. Now, your employees are not all going to have to be to that level. They're not all going to be Old West gunfighters, but they do need to be aware of what that they are looking for, what's going on. They need to be aware of their surroundings and their situation.
I'm pretty sure the lion just wants the toilet paper.
I'm not going to ask her. Actually, lions don't like people very much. They tend to leave whenever you're around them.
Rick asked a question.
Huh?
Rick asked another question.
Oh, what if sysadmin only with one word password? Fire him and he changes before he leaves the company. Okay. Okay. There's a number of different ways to handle firing anybody. First off is there should not be one root password. There should be an admin password per administrator, simply for the fact that, among other things, that way you can monitor exactly who did what. So if you've got an administrator who did something suspicious or made a mistake or whatever, then your logs will reflect who it was who actually did it. It also makes it possible to, it's not just when he fires, he's going to be transferred. He's going to get, he may get a promotion and move on to somewhere else. He may find another job and decide to move somewhere else.
My minions tend to die.
Okay. That's not a real problem because he's not going to go, that particular minion is not going to be telling anybody.
If he's the only one with the root password, that makes things more complicated.
Yes, but if he talks about what he's talking about here is when you fire him. Oh. So what you should do then is No,
he changes it before he leaves the company. So he's the only one with the keys to the kingdom.
Right.
He changes that key and walks out the door.
And that's the case of before you fire somebody, before you inform them that they are being fired, you disable all of their access. You disable their access. Now they can't come back in. And that means even either when they're being fired or simply when they're leaving voluntarily.
Right.
But you simply do that as quickly as possible. And then that way also, since you have an administrator password per administrator, it's not a problem when you disable that particular admin password.
Right.
Oh, and Philip, kitties like to play? Yeah, well, I've met a couple of, I've been in Africa enough times. I've dealt with a couple of those big kitty cats, and they don't like you very much. They soon as they smell you, they tend to leave. Um, so, but anyway, so that's the way that in what Rick's comment is that is the sort of things that are, there's policies, procedures, and guidelines, and there should be some policies set out as to exactly how it is that you terminate someone, whether it's, regardless of whether it's voluntary or being enforced, and to make sure that exactly what you just talked about is that the sysadmin can't change the one and only root password, that he can't that as he's going out the door, he can't steal everything. He can't walk out of the building and then log in remotely and start slurping everything down to a place or something along those lines.
Yeah, there's a lot of places, even when the sysadmin quits, the policy is such that they are relieved of their duties immediately. The passwords are changed and they're put on administrative leave for the remainder of their whatever they gave notice for, 2 weeks, whatever. Just to prevent
anything like this.
Yeah.
I basically had when I was out processing from my last position with the government, they had disabled all of my access to everything. I could still walk into the building, and I could still walk into what had been my office, but I couldn't do anything with the computer access because I didn't have any anymore. So there are some industry accepted policies, procedures, and guidelines dealing with termination. And now that has been brought up, you really should take a look at those things and implement those into your company policies. So yeah. Okay, back to this one. Learning to recognize your phishing attacks. The phishing attacks are handled one of two different ways. They're basically a form of fraud. What they do is the perpetrators are trying to trick the victim to access either a bogus website or a file attachment. And then when somebody loads, and then when either one of these is accessed, this loads a form of malware. Viruses, worms, whatever you want to call them, but basically malware, basically things that aren't doing are doing bad things to your system. Now, there are the websites, the file attachments and so forth, or the websites. The URL addresses are always a bit off. They look close. They're getting so that they're really good, but they're still a bit off. And then also, no file attachment should ever be opened from an unknown sender. This should simply be standard policy. And your employees can be trained to recognize these kind of attacks. But once they are trained, you need to test your training. And there's different companies, but one of the companies is called FishMe, and they basically, what it does is these companies then launch phishing attacks against your company. Since you know who they're coming from, you know that they're not going to do anything malicious to your company. But what they are going to do is they're going to see how well your training and how well your people are actually paying attention. Now, I've listed it being optional, and the reason I've listed it being optional is, once again, I don't know. I really haven't investigated enough to be able to know how much this thing is going to cost. Once again, these are actions that your company needs to be making, but I don't want to bankrupt your company. So, but companies such as FishMe are indeed are options that are out there. And then the next one are backups. Okay, somebody mentioned early on something about bad backups, and yes, you need to be doing backups now. Again, an employee can either accidentally delete a file he didn't want to, or they can load ransomware, or they can load some other form of um, malware. And one of the ways to recover from this is simply to do to recover from your backups. Uh, so, however, your backups need to be of two kinds. One of which you need to be doing it on site, so that you have okay. Rick, I can tell that somebody has been doing his homework because you've got some good questions. Let me get back to you here in a minute. I did just see them. I will answer both of these comments. Don't think that I have forgotten you. But one of which is on site. You need to have some form of backup that's local. But you want to do also an offsite. iDrive is simply one option. There are other companies. But this way, no matter how badly your company is hit, you still have a way to recover. Now, you mentioned something about white hat pen testers. Yes, that is an option. How my reason for not mentioning anything along those lines is simply because I've addressed only your insider threat, and white hat pen testers are normally things that deal with external threats. But the use of white hat pen testers is indeed basically they're hackers that you allow to. For anybody who isn't aware, pen tester is not testing your writing material, but it's a penetration tester, and essentially they're hackers that attempt to hack your system so that they can tell you how they hacked your system. But they are indeed a good recommended cybersecurity system, but not. They normally aren't really dealing with insider threat. You also said you need a versionized backups in case you're slow to detect malware. Yeah. The other problem is if you check it, it takes something like what is it? Almost 180 days before most companies. I think that's the average now for companies to detect that you've had a data breach. For example, when I talked about the rootkits, and so if you do that when you say slow to detect, well, 180 days is pretty slow to detect. But so you've still got some work to do. Hopefully, you've got backups that I don't know if your backups are going to go back that long, but that is indeed. So your comment is indeed very valid. And then Jen says something about most recent backup should be off-site and rotate back towards on-site 2 to 4 generations. I would almost more like say on-site and then to the off-site. But anymore, you can do both at the same time and have them both fairly up to date. But you need to be looking. But backups are not just because of insider threats, but basically backups are required for a whole host of different reasons, and everything from external threat to internal threat to natural disasters. If you get hit with another hurricane and your company is flooded out, you're going to need your backups. But that's not okay. And then Rick, you said hardware failures. Once again, yes, but that's a subject for another time, simply because of the fact that that's not necessarily something that you would deal with in terms of the threat from insider threat. which is what this is specifically mentioned for. But your hardware failure is indeed a reason for your also for your backup strategy. Next. All right. In summary, yes, it may sound like I'm paranoid, but security is kind of the proper field for the clinically paranoid. However, there are real threats out there, and you need to be aware of them, and you need to be able to take care of them. And unfortunately, your own employees can be one of your biggest threats, whether it's on purpose or whether it's simply for the fact that being human, they're going to make mistakes. And you simply need to be aware of these sorts of these threats. Now, here's a quick checklist of the subjects that I mentioned for this webinar. And as I said, that when I started this thing, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are good places to start, and these are good things to be taking a look at as far as how your operation is actually functioning. What is it that you're doing in your particular company, your particular area? Once again, these are going to be recorded. You can do with whatever. And I'll get to you, Rick. That's a good story. Just a second. I'll be right to you. The other one is that Sue might want to put and then there. So you can do with whatever, or possibly if you would want to, we can probably I could probably just send this to you as just one slide, so you don't have to try to transcribe everything that I've got here. But these are just good things for you to take a look at as far as your initial checklist dealing with insider threat.
So I took a quick screenshot. And I'm going to just shoot that to everybody for a second. So you've got something in your hot little hands right this minute in case you have a client that's, chomping at the bit and you need to do something this afternoon.
Okay. Now, Rick said something about don't pick up thumb drives dropped in the parking lot. And yes, sometimes pen testers do exactly that. And then every year there is something called DEF CON in Las Vegas. And that is one of the things that they like to do in the parking lots in Las Vegas, simply because to see what happens, simply because they're a bunch of sick and twisted individuals. And so, yeah, don't pick up thumb drives, don't pick up DVD drives that you aren't aware of, all the rest of these things. And Jamal, yes, you are correct. I did not mention password management. And that's another one of those, and yeah, I didn't mention it. I'm sorry I didn't.
We covered that in the last webinar. You know what we should do is we should go back through the last webinar and make a master checklist.
Okay.
Of the stuff that you covered last time and the stuff that you covered this time, and then we'll put it out to members.
Okay. Because the password management is indeed something that would be occasional for your internal threat. You can indeed download some good information in terms of what you should be doing as far as password management. Okay, Jamal. Okay, yeah. Two-function adapter. Okay, and Rick says something about our laptops at our last company had security cards like the new credit cards with chips before you do certain tasks, especially remote access. The U.S. military, what's it been, almost 10 years, had chips on the backside of your ID cards, and all of the government computers had chip readers, had the for two-factor authentication, and yeah, not necessarily dealing with just insider threat, but just dealing with in terms of that's just become standard, that you do not have that's the only way to log into your system at all. Um, so yeah, two-factor authentication is something that I would really recommend exploring, but not necessarily that germane to just insider threat. Jamal said something about my business conducted almost completely online with SaaS apps, so local file storage is not as much of an issue as passwords are. Yeah, but you still can access those applications, and I can still pull that down into a thumb drive. And then the other part of it is that I would recommend that what you would need to be doing is because everything is online, is to make sure is, and once again, this is not dealing necessarily with insider threat, but something you need to be looking at though um, is um, is making sure what level of security or what level of encryption is your data being transmitted, where is it actually being stored, under what conditions is it being stored, who is actually going to be the administrator, and so on and so forth. There's a number of problems with everybody wants to go to the cloud because of a whole host of things. There are some real security problems dealing with the cloud as well. That's a different, that would possibly be another subject for yet another webinar. Not necessarily this one, but you are indeed correct. There's some real issues there. And then Rick said something about GDPR requirements. Yes, but that's not necessarily dealing with just insider threat, which is what this particular webinar is dealing with only. So
the other,
that is
sorry, go ahead.
That is another possibility for yet another webinar. No, I covered some of those requirements or some of those issues in the last one. I think Sue still has that.
Yeah.
You can still access that from my last one, and so your GDPR requirements or those particular things, rather than covering them yet again, I would recommend that you take a look at the last part of that. You take a look at the last presentation, so that I don't have to go through through all of those GDPR things yet again.
So the other thing I would say is when you've got all of your data stored in SaaS apps, I do a lot of that too. I have a good chunk of my business in Google Docs, and then there are other applications. So like, you've got your CRM where you've got all your emails and your email addresses and that sort of thing. But think about that for a second. So I had just bought into a database company. Fortunately, I didn't have a lot of stuff in there, and they decided to go belly up. Now, they gave me plenty of notice so that I could pull my data out and try to figure out someplace else where I was going to put my application. But the thing of it is, had I been on that vacation that Rich mentioned earlier, and I didn't see that until the message that they were shutting everything down until it was too late, then I would have been a little bit upset. So you want to think about the things that you're using all the time, and how do you back that up? And I have even had instances. Now, Google's got military contracts at this point, so that makes you think that maybe, they're more or less solid. But I mean, how many times has Facebook, being a large company, screwed up things like their security settings from time to time, and the entire world is able to see all of your personal messages and some stuff like that. So you just want to think about don't rely too heavily on somebody else's programming. Just make sure you got your backside covered.
One more little detail that I just thought of while she was mentioning through this horror story is, okay, the company goes, you've got data, you've got personal data, you've got company data, it's stored on a remote device. They go bankrupt. How thorough, what did they do with that? Are we hopefully everything is encrypted, and hopefully they destroy the hard drives and the data properly, but do you have any guarantee? They're out of business, so what are you going to do?
Right.
Okay.
I think part of that was the whole idea behind GDPR. I mean, I know it was personal privacy data, but it was also, disposing of personal data properly and that kind of thing. But just because that's the law doesn't mean that it's actually done. I mean, how many times have you guys gotten rid of a computer that doesn't really work anymore, but you didn't actually um, take the hard drive out and put it up to a magnet or some similar sort of a thing, right?
Rick has said something about, yeah, disposing of obsolete equipment. The U.S. military requires them to be they're erased like 3 times, and then they actually have hard drive shredders, which make a hell of a racket, by the way. And because of that, I always used to pull my memory chips and the hard drives out of any computer that I was getting rid of, and then I would give them to my stepsons and tell them to go destroy them, and they would do things like take a pickaxe to them until the hard drives, the actual drives themselves, the physical drives, were just toast. I mean, this is personal stuff rather than, military secret information, but it's still a way of saying, when you're disposing of your obsolete equipment, you need to make sure that that you don't just reformat those old hard drives. You make sure that they are destroyed. My stepsons had an endless fun destroying the hell.
I can imagine way too much fun. Yes.
They did. Making sure that they cleaned up the mess all over the backyard was a different story, but they had ever so much fun. Nice, powerful magnets and hard drives. Yeah, they are. Okay, now I think that is pretty much.
So the last time you were on, we got to the end, and people wanted to.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
But wait a minute.
But first.
Ta-da! There, now.
People wanted to hire your services. So the last time we talked more about well, tell me what it is you can do. What kind of services can they get from you?
Gulping down.
I got you stumped, didn't I?
Oh. No, I was gulping down water so that I can actually talk. Okay. As you can tell, I'm basically available for consulting in terms of in this case, your policies, procedures, and guidelines dealing with your internal threats. So again, policies, procedures, and guidelines in terms of how you are of your operations. He's talking here about obsolete equipment, about login procedures, your password operations, these sorts of things that I'm available for consulting, and then we can, if you've got questions.
You've also got scanning, right?
I can do scanning. I'm not a pen tester, but I can do scanning. There's kind of a difference.
Yeah.
What level? Yeah, Rick, you mentioned shredders for paper docs. Yes, but make sure you turn them into confetti rather. I mean, rather than just strips, because it makes them much more difficult to
put back together.
Glue back together. You said you use a micro shredder. Yeah. Well, when I was
interesting,
my house, we had a fireplace, and I made a point of I would burn them because of anything that needed to be shredded, rather than having a shredder, I put them we threw them into the fireplace. It's a whole lot harder to glue ashes back together again than whatever size of a paper shredder you end up with.
Interesting.
Your barbecue in your fireplace or whatever can do quite a number on shredder material.
All right. So,
But anyway, there's the website. If you've got a problem, if you've got or ideas or whatever that you're wanting me to take a look at, there's um, you can check with me and we can see what it is we can work out as far as costs and capabilities on and what it is that you actually want to do. Um, we may end up finding out that what you think that you want to do is not what you really want to do. So we can discuss that once you decide that you need my help.
all right. So,
And at that point, in the great words of Porky Pig, but that's all, folks.
I'll ask you to talk a little bit about your background and credentials. What have you done to get here, Mr. Boyd?
What have I done to get here? My background in, okay, Jamal asked the same thing. Yes. What have I done? Let's see. I've got about 20 years of experience working with networking with the U.S. military. I also have a master's degree in cybersecurity. Oh, in terms of government, I've done networking of everything from single user specialized networks all the way up to working with what's called DISA, which is essentially the Sprint for the U.S. government. So I've done everything up to and including international and intercontinental networks. I've done everything from regular unclassified networks in terms of designing, building, testing, cutovers on unclassed networks, on secret networks. I've designed top secret networks. I also have a master's degree in cybersecurity, which I believe I just said. I'm also what is called a CISSP, which is one of the two highest cybersecurity credentials in the industry. The other one deals more with cybersecurity management rather than actual hands-on the cybersecurity. CISSP is more for hands-on type people. I've been in this sort of in this business for a very long time.
And before all of that, you worked for NSA.
Yeah, actually, I did.
Yeah.
Or I worked with NSA actually, because I was actually working for the U.S. Army. But yes.
Okay. So bringing us all the way back to NSA. A great segue back into black magic.
The black magic?
Yeah.
If you look in
worth of black magic.
Well, the thing is I really have you caught me blindsided, so I haven't really taken a look at. But they have some really. There was somewhere or other they called it Vault 7, and a bunch of their software got leaked, a bunch of their tools. And people started finding out exactly what all they could do. They also found out that that there's been computer companies that have been, or that computers have been sold that actually already had backdoors installed into them. They've got all sorts of interesting things, and I would really recommend that rather than for me to try to think off the top of my head what all this is do a search on Vault 7, and they've got a number of things listed that they had and that are now out there in the.
All right, so we might have you back for cameo appearance on a future webinar to talk about the black magic, because that's the stuff that really tickles my fancy. I want to know here's the way that I look at life, the universe, and everything. You get these things that are top secret today, or were a year ago before the leak, and that's the stuff that's going to be hitting consumer technology in a couple of years, as soon as they have new toys, right? And they declassify their current toys. So I'm thinking that if we understood a little bit better what is Black Ops right now, then we'll have an idea of where consumer tech is going to go over the course of the next couple of years.
What's these sorts of things are not going to end up as computer tech. I mean, as consumer tech, because of you may end up having it in terms of like Metasploit, so that the cybersecurity profession is using some of these, both the good guys and the bad guys, because we use exactly the same tools. But what is going to happen in terms of the regular consumer market is they're going to start taking a look at as far as what security procedures need to be put in place in the things coming on the market to be able to screen against, because we've got. I mean, we're constantly. The consumer devices are constantly having more and more security hardware on, or are becoming more and more secure, and some of these things are going to end up having to be done. Got a couple of new questions. What are the services we can resell, and how do we do it? That I'm afraid I'm going to end up sort of having to have Sue's help with this, because I'm not a marketer.
So he's got several services. There's a consultation service, which is a good place to start for a lot of companies, because they need to understand where they're at and where the vulnerabilities lie, and how to manage that. And so the checklist that was part of this is a good foot in the door in that regard. You can sit down and you can talk to your clients about where they're at and what things they should be thinking about, and that'll get their thought processes going, and they'll become more aware of what they don't know and what steps they should be taking, and that will probably lead to more conversations. So then you can either come back and do some kind of a consultation, or he's got a couple of subscription options for just checking out your websites, just the servers and the websites, to make sure that they're secure. It just looks at all the vulnerabilities. It gives you a report on what's open and what's secure, and an idea of what to do to fix the issues. Does that sum it up?
Now those, yeah, but those scanners scan your network or your website, and that's just that network. And it's an external, so it's external vulnerabilities on that specifically.
Right.
So your other things, such as what are your vulnerabilities dealing with your cloud services? What are your insider threats or problems? What are your the architecture styles have becoming completely different. And go back and see the other, watch the other video, so I don't have to repeat this. But so some of these things are going to have to be relooked at, and the network architectures are simply going to have to be reassessed. So there's a whole host of different things that can, in that point can be brought up. And so once again, you take a look at the checklist and you start saying, okay, well, where are you? And we can resell it. We can resell the consulting services and so forth that way.
So my best suggestion is, if you have a client that's interested in security and is looking for where to get started, his phone number's there on the website. You can give him a call and just talk to him about what are the next steps to move forward. It's a little, well, I won't say it's a little bit, it's quite a bit. It's not a cut and dried sort of a thing. So it's client by client, largely.
Mm-hmm.
Rick's quest.
There's certain industry policies, procedures, and guidelines that can be implemented, but a lot of things are, not all of these companies, not all of your operations, or not all of your customers are going to fit in the nice little pigeonholes, and so they need to be your security strategy needs to be customized per your customer. Rick asked You know how keyloggers work and the scramblers help stop them. That's a completely different subject, but essentially what they do is they transmit one way or another. There's a number of different ways that they do this, but they transmit basically everything that you just typed on your keyboard to somebody that you really didn't want to know everything you just typed into your keyboard. So everything from your um, um, from just your email to your wife, girlfriend, either or both, um,
That could get
to
sticky.
huh?
That could get sticky.
That's yes, blackmail material. To your to your username and passwords. So it transmits just everything. And then how do scramblers help stop them? Well, it depends on how. So I'm assuming you're talking about like a form of jammer, in which case it's going to jam the signal, but it also depends on how they're transmitting, because some of them will actually piggyback out of your own network, in which case that's not really going to be doing a whole lot. The information we should ask the potential clients before contacting you. Also, how long does it take for you to set up security scan services? Um, well, basically, would be as a case of how much. What do we ask these? Is to what is their cybersecurity um, profile presently, and where do they think that they should go? And if they're not interested, they're fools. But and then where do they want to go? And then we also need to be once again, we want to make sure that we try to harden their system. We don't want to bankrupt them. So we also need to be taking a look at what they can actually afford. And how long does it typically take me to set up a security scan service? Normally, it won't take too terribly long, because basically all I really need to do is to um,
A day, basically, is what
yeah,
we're talking about.
I need some IP addresses and stuff. And Rick says I use a scrambler called Key Scrambler, which is supposed to encrypt data between keyboard and computer, thinking might install something in keyboard memory. Yeah, but I'm assuming then that you're meaning that you've got a wireless keyboard. Is that correct, Rick? Okay, that you've just got a standard keyboard? Because, well, I mean, it depends on where you're. Okay, it's a standard. It depends on where that scrambler actually is located, depending on whether or not it's in the.
It depends on what
Uh,
kind of a keylogger it's trying to defeat.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if it's if
Where
it's
is that in the transmission?
yeah, if it's some kind of, I mean, typically a keylogger is some kind of malware that you get, and so it's trying to write a software keylogger. So it's like logging your keystrokes and then sending them back over the internet somewhere. So it's attempting to either scramble the keys or insert characters or do something along those lines. But there's my gut hunch is that's like it makes you feel good more than it's actually going to be
Yeah,
really
and
useful.
and it also depends on what kind of yeah, you'll Google it. Well, it also kind of depends on where I put it, because if I were to put it, you can have software keyloggers. I can have a dongle kind of a thing that sticks between your machine and the actual plug for your computer. I mean, for your from your keyboard. I mean, there's all sorts of weird places it can go, and it's kind of a case of how exactly your key scrambler works, as well as what kind of a keylogger you're actually dealing with. So it's a it depends,
Yeah, exactly.
like so many things. Ah,
All right. So, sadly, I need to hop on another call. So, Rich, I can't tell you how grateful I am for you being here today. This has been a lot of fun and very educational.
A lot of fun, and you didn't. And it meant that's a webinar you didn't have to do.
Exactly. So, so just so you know, guys, right at the moment, so Fran and I have split ways. If you haven't heard, Fran and I have gone down separate paths. I have ended up on a really huge medical project, which is taking 140% of my time. Um, and but I'm getting a lot of really good information out of it. And in another month or so, when we've got a lot of processes honed, I'll be back and share lessons learned with you guys. There's a whole bunch of software that I can tell you right now you shouldn't bother with that we've thrown out for one reason or another. And I will be back next month to talk about so we've got the whole process right from front to back, and we're doing a phone center and like the works. So it's a ginormous funnel. We're using the new in-market leads from Traffic Oxygen. And so I have all kinds of stuff to tell you. Next month will be really juicy, but I didn't have any time to put it together today or this last week. So yeah, I am very grateful, Rich, for your stepping in and helping us out and sharing with us all this information. So on that note, we'll let everybody go. Thank you for your time. Thanks again, Rich, for being here. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys next month.
All right.